Hi everyone, I'm Zach Reinhardt, here to review the new Foodman album, Easy Minzoku. Foodman is a electronic kind of experimental music producer. He's been at times associated with juke and footwork and the kind of glitch genres. But I feel to put a genre label on Foodman is doing a disservice to just how weird his music is. I've known about Foodman for a little while, but this is the first full album I'm picking up and listening to. I heard it was coming out, and I liked the kind of teaser track for it, Hikari, and so I decided I was going to review it, and I gave it some listens, and despite being quite familiar with all the genres that he's associated with, and being familiar with just very experimental electronic music in general, I feel very almost out of my element in reviewing this. It seems very foreign to me, and it shouldn't. Foodman's sound is that of a kind of alien robot who's never actually listened to any music before, but was explained everything about music at length and then given a studio to record an album in. Foodman takes all the puzzle pieces that make up a song and then cuts a bunch of holes in them to make them fit where they're not supposed to. And he completes the puzzle, but the picture does not look right. He makes heavy use of samples and very simple synthesizers. The percussion is often very jittery, and it's either extremely busy or it's incredibly sparse with just a few drum hits every once in a while. The melodies are typically fairly simple, but harmonies get kind of weird. And the just synthesizers that he uses are not like soundcrafted at all. They're very just like straight up, this is a saw wave. Or he uses a few times on this album a like fake trumpet synthesizer. And like if you've ever played with like an electronic keyboard, like a shitty Casio keyboard, and played with all the presets on it, you'll know a lot of them are like just these kind of weird noises that you would never actually use in a song, but they're there. Foodman has taken quite a liking to those noises. There's a lot of like little weird whistles and like just noises that seem to just be like shitty, like cheap Casio keyboard presets that he just throws in all over this album. He makes heavy use of guitar and vocal samples, as well as just samples of random noises. His songs can sometimes start to border on like sound collage territory, but they never completely desert melody and rhythm and just go for like a weird soundscape. This thing is a kind of tongue in cheek, silly, ridiculous take on modern Western, or Westernized at least, music. On the songs Jazz and Rock, he does a very kind of just ridiculous, very silly caricature of what jazz and rock are. On jazz, you get these kind of sizzling hi-hats and ride cymbals, but they never really come together to do anything like in a typical jazz drum fashion. You get these like synthesized trumpets and these very low horns, and it's like all the pieces of jazz put together wrong. And eventually in the song, he starts sampling the sound of this like a man screaming, and he pitch shifts it a whole bunch of times in all sorts of different ways and makes it sound just like this really weird instrument. And eventually he starts using it to create chords, which are just some of the strangest noises I've ever heard. These like triad chords of pitch shifted screaming. It is incredibly odd. But the song is, as some to me, who's very familiar with jazz, hilarious. It's just this really silly, over the top take on jazz, and the same thing for the song Rock. It has these like cut up, distorted guitar samples that are all over, and then it has like this really happy synthesizer melody, and then the drums are just like one tom being hit over and over again. It's like the strangest attempt at rock music I've ever heard. Like I said, it sounds like you've just told somebody what rock music is, but never showed them it and just gave them all the instruments and told them to make a song. The most normal song on here is Midsummer Night featuring Disco Margot, which is kind of a trap influenced, kind of ambient trance track with some kind of free form vocals over top of it, female vocals. It has the kind of trap flavored twittering hi hats and booming sub bass laid over this like smooth, deep synth pad with these kind of ambient, like reverby beeps and boops in the background. It's a lot less experimental than the rest of the tracks here, and it also just takes itself a lot more seriously than the rest of the tracks here. This album overall is very kind of tongue in cheek. It's very silly. It's very over the top, and it doesn't take itself very seriously. There's also a track featuring Kowabe Taigen from Boningen, which is like this kind of strange soundscape of some synthesizers and samples with Taigen just kind of speaking over top in this very kind of creepy, almost whispery voice. There's a little bit of singing that shows up. It's like very just kind of weird, and it's the intro to the album. If I wanted to try to talk about like tracks I didn't like and tracks I did like, I really like the second track, Uoxtu, Uoxtu. Don't know how to pronounce that, but it's one of the tracks that kind of borders on sound collage. It's got a whole just mess of samples layered over top of each other that are all kind of going at different rhythms, and it starts off fairly sparse but kind of builds, and then eventually at some point it kind of actually turns into a bit of a beat made of like weird vocal samples and percussion hits. It's actually like one of the tracks that kind of got my head bobbing. I also like the track Hikari, which was the teaser for this album. It's got this like jittery, cut up, pitch shifted sample of like elevator music or muzak. It almost sounds like it could come from like some cheesy infomercial from the 80s. It's actually very relaxing for as kind of jittery and weird as it is. It's very short, but it stands out from the rest of the tracks in how sonically kind of different it is. I also like the track Yami Nabe almost entirely because it has this like cut up sample of you know that like wooden hollow noisemaker. It's got like a bunch of bumps and kind of ribs on it, and you just run like a stick across it, and it makes just like a weird noise. He samples that and like cuts it up into this like incredibly strange just string of noises that is some of the oddest just soundcraft and sampling that I've ever heard. Though there are a few tracks that I thought were just kind of boring or weren't really exploring anything very new, like the song Urepi, which is just kind of a collage of random samples put over this like deep kind of spacey synth pad chord. It doesn't really do all that much for me. It's just kind of there. And there are a few tracks like that that just kind of are a whole bunch of samples put together that don't seem to have the same amount of craft to them as some of the other tracks. But overall, this album is very kind of silly, very tongue in cheek. It doesn't take itself very seriously. It isn't some incredible artistic statement of electronic music. It is a lot of fun, though. There's definitely plenty to enjoy here, but the appeal is mostly the kind of spectacle of how strange the sounds are on here. So after listening to this whole thing, I'm like, what the hell kind of rating do I give it? I can't really say if it's good or bad. It's just really strange. So I think I'm feeling a ampersand percentage sign underscore out of 10. Yep. It's a weird one, but that's me. New Foodman album, Easy Minzoku. I don't know, give it a listen. It's really fucking strange. Fuck if I know, man. Fuck if I know, man.